everyone, it's Alyssa and this is Always Cinema Chic, the place that encourages you to go out, get dressed up, and watch a movie. So today I am reviewing the Snowman, and I'll just start by saying, what's wrong with this movie? Everything! Yes, literally everything is wrong with this movie, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So, The Snowman stars Michael Fassbender, Rebecca Ferguson, and Charlotte Gainsbourg, and it's directed by Tomas Alfredson, who directed such incredible movies like Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy, and Let Me In. I love these films. But here, it is just a disaster, from the music to the cinematography to the dialogue and the structure of the story, and yes, even some of the acting, and it pains me to say that. So the movie starts off with the first scene where you get the entire psychological motivation of the serial killer for when he's a little kid. So like most films that may want to just kind of divulge little pieces of information to, keep you engaged with what's going on in the story, this movie just gives you everything in the first 5 minutes, and you know why he's doing it and why he's targeting these women, and there's really nothing to figure out. It's horrible. So then we're introduced to Harry Hole, who's played by Michael Fassbender, and he is certainly a little worse for wear. He's definitely an alcoholic, and it seems like he uses his job as a means to just swap one addiction for another. So a series of women go missing and are murdered by a serial killer who just really likes to build snowmen to let you know he's around. What these women all have in common is that they do not play the role of a picture-perfect mom. They may not know who the child's father is, or they might bring multiple men around the child, or they might be cheating within the family, but either way, this guy obviously doesn't like if women don't know their role, and they are certainly getting punished for it. But when I was watching, I couldn't help but let my mind go in the direction of, didn't someone see this guy building a snowman? Because it would take at least like 5 or 10 minutes, and you would think this uber creepy guy on their neighbor's property might be a red flag that something's going on, but that is probably the least of the movie's plot holes, but I thought I'd bring it up anyway. And so then there is Katrine Bratt, who's played by Rebecca Ferguson, and she helps Harry Hole to solve the case. And then you find out that there is something kind of hiding in her past. I wonder what it could be. And then rounding out the cast is Raquel, who's played by Charlotte Gainsbourg, and she's Harry's ex-girlfriend, but they still hang around each other because they still have feelings for each other, and Harry likes to be around her son and act as a kind of father figure. The only problem is there's a new guy in town. So where to start with how abysmal this movie is? I have to go with the writing, and it pains me to say that Hussein Amini is one of the screenwriters for this film. He wrote Drive, so I'm just gonna end up blaming the other two guys who are working on this movie as well. The writing just goes so off course. Now, I read the Joe Nesbo novel, The Snowman, years and years ago. I didn't even know that that book was going to be turned into a movie when I read it, and I loved it. It's when all of those Scandinavian detective novels, like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, were really popular. This one wasn't as good as that, but it was certainly a lot of fun, and I couldn't wait for this adaptation to come. But they kept in the strangest parts from the novel. Like, for example, Harry's whole apartment is infested with mold, and during the course of the novel you keep seeing this issue with the mold over and over again, and it symbolizes his toxic state of mind and the toxic environment that he lives in. But in the movie it's just a plot point that didn't even need to be a point. And with this kind of movie, you just desperately want to love the characters. That's why you watch this type of film, is to have like a deep character study and analysis. Harry Hole is a dark man who has a somewhat snarky and cocky disposition, characteristics that I loved in the novel and were utterly non-existent in the film. He forms a real connection with Katrine, but in the film, these two never get intimate or emotional. They simply are trying to solve the case. And then there's Harry's relationship with Raquel, which should be really flirtatious throughout the film, but it only really amounts to one very awkward scene at the end. And I can't help but think, don't these writers know that audiences want characters that we can actually connect to, that have actual dialogue, that show some kind of intimacy with each other. And then don't even get me started on the structural issues in this movie. I know they had a lot of problems and 15% of the script is missing in the film, but I still have to, judge what is in front of me. And by putting the whole entire backstory of the killer in the first 5 minutes of the movie, number one, you told me that he's a man, so you eliminated an entire gender of who the audience could be guessing as the killer. And number two, you learn his entire psychological motivation right from the beginning, and then nothing else. Harry gets one note that says Mr. Police, and it's in a little kid's writing, and you see a snowman, and there are tons of snowmen everywhere. And yeah, he might be lurking around in a couple of corners, but it's not a great presence in the film. And I think of something like Seven, and how John Doe was just not in that film at all, and piece by piece you start understanding his plan and why he's killing the people that he kills, and it just feels like he's taunting the detectives, and it's this cat and mouse game, and there's a lot of tension. And then when you do finally see him, everything comes together, and it is just the perfect ending, and you feel that character, his presence is just throughout the whole movie, and here just not at all. There's a scene in the beginning, there's a note, a little bit of stalking around in the car, and then the serial killer is kind of see you later. There are also really strange subplots that don't serve the story other than to provide suspicious characters who may be the serial killer. And then there's Val Kilmer, who's in a subplot that works in the book, but it's way too rushed in the movie, and you really didn't need that to move the story forward in any way. And those scenes were really, really awkward. But then there are characters that come into the film, and then they just disappear with no explanation of who they are or why they're there. So for instance, there's this really mysterious woman who goes to Vettelsen's house. You don't need to know who he is, but she goes into the house, then we see her later with Vettelsen at a dinner, and he forces her to take her top off in front of another guest. And then you see her again in Vettelsen's house, and she's up at a window, and she's looking longingly down like she's in some kind of trouble. And then that's it. She's not in the movie. Who was she? I don't know. What's her purpose? I have no idea. Maybe to add a little bit more mystery. It was absurd, the amount of characters that they kind of integrate in the movie, and they never tie up their storylines, and they do it just to kind of throw you off the scent of who the really obvious serial killer actually is. Then there's the melodrama. Oh, the melodrama. So down to the sweeping camera movements every time you're introduced to a character that maybe we shouldn't trust, to the music that every time you hear it goes dun 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 when there is a new character, or a really creepy car that's following someone around, or when a husband looks angrily at his wife, and it was just too much to bear. Now, I could have maybe handled this if the melodrama was throughout the whole movie, because then it would be a funny, bad movie. But it doesn't always keep that kind of tone throughout. So this was a movie, to me, that had no tone at all whatsoever, and I can't say much worse than that. And then there's also the cinematography, which I really expected to be beautiful and epic, grand, dark, gritty, very atmospheric, and what I got was just a bunch of snow. That was it. And so I got no sense of the city of Oslo or any real sense of danger in the movie. I was expecting a film with a distinct style like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and what I ended up getting was a Lifetime serial killer movie. Now, I will give some credit to the main actors, but only some. Michael Fassbender is, I think, one of the greatest working actors right now. I could watch him read, a math textbook, and I would still have fun watching him act. In fact, I honestly think that I would enjoy watching him read the math textbook more than watching him play Harry Hole. Now, like I said before, this character, he's an addict, but he's also really snarky, and he's kind of funny, and he has has a definite personality, and you don't see any of that come out in the film. When I heard that Michael Fassbender was cast in this role, I was actually jumping up and down because I knew he was going to be perfect, all the way down to his kind of all-knowing sardonic smile that he has. To me, that was the embodiment of the character, and you don't get to see any of that personality in the film. And I know that is primarily the fault of the writers, but he's a really smart guy, and I'm kind of surprised that he didn't realize that, you know, the film needs a little bit of humor. Even Seven has humor, and that's what elevates it as well. And, you know, he's fine in the movie, but to me, saying Michael Fassbender is fine in this movie is one of the worst reviews I can give for him, because he's such an outstanding actor. And then there are the smaller characters where some of the actors were just horrific. So Chloe Sevigny plays a pair of twins. She's not in the movie for very long, thank God, but I don't know what kind of accent she was trying to do, but from my perspective, it was embarrassing to watch her act. And then there's Val Kilmer in the movie, and you know, I have such a soft spot for Val Kilmer. Growing up, he was one of my favorite actors when I was a teenager, and just seeing what he looked like in this film kind of broke my heart. It took me a good 2 or 3 minutes to even realize that was Val Kilmer, and I understand the character is supposed to be that way, but that's how Val Kilmer actually looks right now, and seeing him look so unhealthy made me feel kind of uncomfortable watching the film. And if I'm being honest, he uses this really strange, dark, deep voice in the movie that I've never heard him use in my life, and I started thinking that his role was actually dubbed, because what he was saying didn't actually match up with his mouth, and it was really distracting. And I can't believe that I'm saying that for a Hollywood feature-length film. That should not be a problem that I ever notice in a movie that's getting released nationally. So I just keep coming back to Alfredson, and I'm not quite sure how he made this movie, what happened exactly. Something clearly happened here, but he's made films that are so atmospheric and beautiful, and gotten such incredible performances out of his actors, and had, you know, worked with really wonderful cinematographers, and his films are excellent. So something definitely happened here that everything just went totally off the rails, and the whole production was abominable, like the Snowman. And now for the grades. In terms of film and artistry, I would give the Snowman a D. Even the CGI was awful, and they didn't use that much of it, but when they did, oh, you could really tell they were using CGI. I mean, at least I could say some of the performances are pretty decent. The story is somewhat coherent, but these are definitely not pluses. And then in terms of watchability, I would give this a D as well. Even Michael Fassbender could not make me enjoy this movie, which is really saying something. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that he's been in that I hated this much. And I was so excited. This movie had everything going for it. When it first came out, Martin Scorsese was set to direct it, and everything just seemed like this was going to be an unstoppable film. And then I didn't hear so much about it for a while, and that told me that something was not right. Something was definitely getting messed up with the film. I just didn't know how disastrous it was going to be. I honestly feel bad saying that, because I really wanted to like this movie, but I just can't. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching these reviews. Please leave a comment below if you've read the book, seen the movie, read anything about the movie. I know that it had all of the problems in terms of not filming 15% of it, but to me that doesn't address the fact that the music was bad, the cinematography was bad, the acting was way over the top for certain actors. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that 15% of the script wasn't even filmed. So I can't look at that as an excuse for why this movie was so bad. But once again, please like and subscribe. And remember, it's always in fashion to go out, get dressed up, and make it a cinema chic night. Bye, everyone.